So we are discussing about the useReducer hook. So before discussing useReducer, you need to understand what the useState is doing. So this is a simple React where you are rendering a component called increment on click. Um, so what is this increment on click doing? This component has got some state initialized with 1, and so it is rendering this thing button. So on click you're calling this function, and this function is setting the state. So here you see this is a callback where you are getting previous value which is initialized as an input, and you are adding 1 to it. So on every click you are getting the previous value and adding 1 to it and re-rendering the component. So that's what useState is doing it currently.
Okay, so right now we are learning about useReducer hook. Okay, so useReducer hook is a replacement to Redux. Previously we used to use Redux. So 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 it is so useReducer hook is also used to manage the state and re-render the component once the state has been updated, or so yeah. So useReducer hook is used to play with the state. So whenever there is a state, React will automatically re-render that component in the UI. So so when to manage the state and re-render the component once the state has been updated, we already have a hook called useState hook. But the React the useReducer hook comes handy when if you wanted to separate out the state logic from the component, or if you have multiple elements of the state that typically change together. That's when useReducer hooks comes handy. Okay, so let's look at what useReducer hook is. So if you wanted to use reducer hook, all that you have to do is react.useReducer, which takes a reducer function and a initial state. Okay, so this useReducer hook returns two things. One is the initial state and the other one is the dispatcher function. So if so this dispatcher function takes an action as an action as its argument. Okay, so in this case, so if you look at if you look at if you look at if you look at how we are managing the state here, if you're clicking, the state is getting updated and the component is getting re-rendered, which is similar to how the useState does. But here if you see, all that you have to remember is it accepts a reducer function, an initial state, and it returns the state, the current state, and a dispatcher function. This dispatcher function takes in the action which uh, this action is nothing but the way we update the state. Okay, the action here is an object. Okay, it's an object. So if you see the reducer function is just it's taking the current state and adding one to it. Okay, so that's what the useReducer hook is doing here.